In this video, I'll be transforming this terrain into a small Italian-inspired village, packed full of houses, cafes and restaurants, with many secrets added throughout. I aim to get as close as possible to that cozy Italian feel, whilst also adding my own flair along the way. Now, as with every village build, we need to pick a location of course, and after lots of exploring, I settled on this area here, a mostly flat piece of terrain with 2 areas either side of a river. But before we get to building, we need to prepare the land. That means removing any trees, pools of water, cave entrances, get them gone, just cover them up. We don't want those. Okay, now once we've got some much neater looking terrain, we need to add some shape and elevation. We don't want any of this flat terrain. Just throw down some dirt, get some curvature happening in there, until you've got something that looks, I guess, semi-decent. I mean, you guys can be the judge. Heading over to the south side of the river now, we've got a nice plot of land here, with a couple close connections we can use for some bridges, if they don't fancy swimming across. We're now ready for step 2, which is planning. Going to begin with the main square in the centre of town, connecting across the river to what is going to be a vineyard. Returning back to the main village side, we're just going to be plotting out a rough idea of where we'd like the houses and roads to be. The red representing larger main roads, whilst yellow are the more narrow side alleyways weaving throughout the houses. Finishing off with a quick line of trees just to give the village a border, and we're done. Now, the keen-eyed viewers amongst you may have realised that the bridges right now are just plain stone, but we don't want that. So starting with the easier of the two, I first closed the gap to make it only 9 blocks wide, because odd numbers are just a lot easier to work with. And I've gone for a stone arch bridge design here. It's always better if you can still ride a boat underneath, so an arch was definitely the way forward. Adding some texture above whilst using deep slate underwater to give it that weathered look. I finished with some smaller details on top for that much needed pop of colour and changed out the centre for spruce planks, and that completes bridge 1. Heading over to the second bridge now, and let's just say I won't be building another diagonal bridge for a long time. This first design felt it didn't quite match the vibe of bridge 1, so I scrapped it and tried to do an arch bridge instead. This took much longer than it seemed, but I finally got somewhere I was happy with. Finishing with some texture and smaller details, and that completes bridge 2. The final step was to add a river wall connecting both of the bridges together, using that same texture as before, as well as that deep slate underwater. And we can't forget a spruce fence railing to prevent any unwanted casualties. And that completes our bridges. Putting our new bridges to good use, we're going to cross over and begin work on the first building of the village, which is the vineyard house. I started with a few rectangles just to get the basic shape before going in and adding the smaller details. Now this is the part that really brings the build to life. Lots of leaves, trapdoors, fences, you name it, we've probably used it. Now if you've got a flat wall, just chuck in an overhang. It's an easy way to add shape, and you can also use it for some storage. Finishing up with a dirt path wrapping around the house and connecting back to the main bridge. And that completes the vineyard house. Heading straight in with the next building, now this is going to be a small storage house. This will be where the bulk of the wine from the vineyard will be stored. I'm adding a small pergola to the side for some additional space, before connecting this back to the main house. I also added another small storage hut, cause why not? Now we can start work on the actual vineyard. I began by making some rough lines just to get the idea, before then going through and adding the full detail. I'm using a combination of leaves here to make it more interesting, along with some tall rose flowers and sweet berry bushes to add that nice pop of colour. I continued this up and behind the house to fill this empty plot of land we had, before then going through and adding a path between each of the rows. Finishing up with a few custom trees dotted around, and it wouldn't be complete without a cozy campfire to finish the day. And that completes our vineyard. Now, you guys may have noticed we have a large blue outline in the centre of town. Well, this has been reserved for the main village church. I started off with a basic rectangle before then adding an entrance to the front. I always find it easy to begin with a rough shape and then add some extensions off to the sides. I'm using brick and granite for the roof, as this is a colour often used in many Italian towns. And of course, no church is complete without a bell tower. Again, just adding a rough shape for now, ready for the detailing later. Finishing up with a few more extensions, one to the side and one more to the back. And now it's time for the best part, the detailing. After adding some texture, I'm going through and adding some windows, throwing down some leaves, some flowers, and you'll find that this is probably going to be a running theme in this village. I did also build an interior to this church, and will do for every house in this village. Now it's time to start laying down the roads in the town. I've gone for a darker road colour using deep slate to try to help add some contrast to the buildings. Finishing up the church now with a small courtyard, complete with a simple bench to relax, as well as some custom trees. I also made sure to add some slabs to the rows to make everything run smoothly. And with that, the church is complete. Now it's important we don't neglect the smaller details around town, so this fountain in the square achieves just that. This will also be the centre point of the marketplace we build later on in the video. Now it's time to get to business. The first set of houses in the village. The main goal for these was to use bright and vibrant colours, similar to a lot of the coastal towns you find across Italy. You know, we don't want any boring or bland houses around here. The detailing is what really brings these builds to life. Just like with the church, I'm using all kind of leaves and flowers. Of course, we need to add some chimneys to bring the village alive, and balconies are another feature that I'm going to implement a lot in this village. I finished up this side with a simple overhang above the entrance, and of course some more leaves. Heading round to the back now, and at first I struggled a bit with what to build here. I ended up going with a small courtyard type area, with an exterior staircase up to the top, and some smaller details dotted around. I added the final details to the front, and with that the first set of houses is complete. Now for the second set of houses. These are going to be built just behind the first set. An important feature I want in this village is to have tight, narrow alleyways weaving throughout the buildings. You know, we're talking like 3 to 4 blocks gap at most. I went with another courtyard area here, again including a simple staircase, and finished up this house with some final windows and detailing. And maybe my favourite feature so far, I added this hanging clothesline connected each side, of course in the Italian colours. Before moving on, I felt the church was now looking too small compared to the houses, with the tower only slightly taller than the roofs, so let's fix that. Now it's only a small difference, I've gone for 2 blocks larger in each direction, but I feel it now fits the village much better. Getting straight to the next build, and it's a must have for our town, a pizzeria. No Italian town is complete without one, and I thought this place deserved being located right in the centre of the square. As always, I started with a rough shape, before then adding the finer details. This one was built in collaboration with fellow builder Zach MC, and I really liked how this one turned out. Of course, it's not complete without a pizza oven, as well as some outside seating. And we made sure the interior was just as cozy as the vibe we created outside. Finishing up with some final touches out the front, including a book and quill with a full menu and price list. And that completes our pizzeria. Next up, I wanted to tackle this set of houses just to the right. Of course, going for some colour in the walls just like the rest of the houses. We decided the front orange house would be a cozy flower shop, with the greenhouse being a small bar, serving as a chilled place to hang out and enjoy a drink. It features this scenic wraparound balcony. You'll find out later in the video that this was perhaps not the best of ideas. Next up was to add one more small house in the corner. It took quite a few attempts to get the colour combo I was happy with, but I feel these two work quite well together. I added a small courtyard at the back with a tight alleyway between the two houses, and finished with another hanging clothesline just like before. Now the pizzeria can't be the only restaurant in town, so we're going to build some rivals just across the road. I went with a more muted colour theme on this build, using stone on the base and sandstone on the upper floor. Of course, adding some details to make the build come alive, and balconies were also included to give the residents living above a beautiful view of the river and vineyard. I realised there was no access to the housing above, so I added this exterior staircase, and of course some more clotheslines. I've separated the building into 2 sections, one side being a restaurant and the other side being the first gelato shop in town. Gelato is one of the best foods to come out of Italy, so it's only right that we include a few of these dotted around the village. Up next is this building just next door. We're going to make this another restaurant slash bar downstairs, with some more resident housing on the upper floor. I went with a more colourful palette on this one, and I wanted to include another hanging clothesline, because why not? Now we need to make the most of the waterside location, so I added some outdoor seating to really take in those views. Finishing off of course with another balcony, as well as some final details, and we're done. Now before we start the next house, we have this empty plot of grass next to our pizzeria, but we don't want that. So here I'm just wrapping around a simple stone wall and filling the centre with some custom trees and a few benches for extra seating. Moving swiftly on to the next building in town, and no village is complete without a town hall, and I felt this would be a great place for it. As always, we're starting with the basic shape, before then adding the windows and details. You guys should know this by now. Ideally I would have made this larger, but I kept it in line with the other buildings in town. I then decided I wanted a clock on the front, so I moved the windows around to fit one in the centre. And there we have the town hall. Moving on to the next building, and I realised the village right now doesn't have a cafe, so let's fix that. I went with a classic red and white overhang on the sides, and made the upper floor some more residential housing. I felt outside seating was a must-have for this, tucked away just off the main square in this quiet alleyway for the villagers to sit down and enjoy the weather. I made sure to include a staircase to access the upper floor, and finished off with a hanging sign to name the cafe. And we're done. Now comes the part I've been most looking forward to, the central square marketplace. I started by pushing a few buildings back to make some more space. This also made the fountain more centered. We're going to start with this market stall right here. I went simple with a classic red and white color scheme, which actually works perfect as this stall will be selling the red and white wine produced in the vineyard across the river. For the next stall, we have a green and white color scheme. This one will be selling the fresh fish caught in the nearby river and lake. Moving across the square, and it's only right that we build a flower stall in front of our existing flower shop. I continued around the square to fill the space we had, ensuring a nice variety of different villager professions, including this sweet berry stall, a local farmer stall, as well as a butcher selling some locally farmed meats. Of course, our customers need a place to sit down, so adding these small tables was the perfect solution. And the market is no good if you can't see at night, so adding these street lights fixes that issue. I finished up with a few smaller details, like the simple storage carts the merchants would use to transport their goods. And that completes our marketplace. A big thing our village is missing right now is a bakery, a staple to any Italian village, so it's about time that we added one in. As always, we've gone for a vibrant block palette, and I wanted to include a small terrace to benefit from the riverside views. I added a courtyard area at the back with custom trees and benches and finished with a sign at the front to give it a name, and that completes our bakery. Next up on the list was to build a barber shop, but I accidentally paused the recording whilst building this one, so here's an after shot of what I built. I realised this about halfway through building, so enjoy the end of the building process. I of course had to add a balcony at the front to enjoy these views, and this barbershop has a secret basement down below. I wonder what could be down there. If you're enjoying this video and would like to explore these secrets for yourself, you can download this entire village along with all build assets over on my Patreon. Link is down below. On to the next building now, which is a clothes and fabric shop, the place for our villagers to keep up with the local fashion trends. I kept this one simple using brick and granite and added a small slope roof to the side. Of course, adding the usual details with leaves and flowers, and not forgetting the staircase to the side to access the housing above. Finishing up of course with a sign out front, and we're done. Something huge in Italy is football, and being one of my personal favourite sports, I couldn't wait any longer but to add in a football pitch. Before building however, I had to prepare a piece of land ready for it, and with limited space that meant making an expansion to our existing town border. I began by placing the pitch outline, before then adding the smaller details like the goals, the pitch markings and the corner flags. And of course we need some spectator stands so our residents can support their local team. No pitch is complete without a nice pitch pattern. Here I've alternated moss and green concrete powder. I initially added floodlights, but I removed them later as I thought they ruined the small village vibe. Right now it's looking a bit out of place, so we need to blend it in with the rest of the village. Adding walls and custom built trees is an easy way to achieve this. Of course every football club needs an official club shop, a place where fans can buy the latest kits and merchandise. I also had this empty patch of grass, and I thought this was the perfect spot to add a small pond. Finishing up now with a path wrapping around the pitch, surrounding it with tall custom trees and additional benches outside for spectators. And I thought this spot of land here was the perfect place to add in a beach, a place to relax or to celebrate after winning the local derby. As it turns out, the derby was being held today, so it wouldn't be complete without adding some players onto the pitch. And here I am now removing those floodlights I mentioned earlier. Let me know which version you prefer. Now so far we've been focusing on shops and restaurants and other key buildings in the village, but of course we also need a place for our villagers to live, so let's do just that. For this first house I've gone for a contrasting white and green block palette using spruce and oak trapdoors for the roof. I built a courtyard area around the back, including a pergola for some shaded outside seating. I finished up with a couple chimneys on the roof, and that completes our first house. Moving straight on to the next house, just next door from the first. Again, this is more housing for our villagers, starting with the basic shape as always, before then adding the smaller details like the windows, the leaves. Of course it's not complete without some balconies to take in the scenic views around. And that completes house 2. Now, you may remember that we had a farmer stall in our marketplace selling local produce to our villagers, but currently we're lacking an actual farm, so it's about time we added one in. I've built this barn mainly for storage, but also as a place for some animals to live. Of course, we mustn't forget the smaller details like this log pile. For this remaining space, I filled it with some farmland, an easy way to fill a large area whilst also adding some colour. I finished with a few custom trees, and that completes our farm. Moving over to the opposite corner of the village, where I began by expanding the border just like we did for the farm. It also includes smoothing out some of the terrain, as well as patching in any holes. This small hill is the perfect spot for some old castle ruins. I started with the basic shape of a castle, and then used some TNT to blow it up. Now it worked okay, but there was still some touching up to do afterwards. Obviously we want this to look run down, so I'm using mossy blocks along with leaves and vines to create that look. I built another wall to section this area off from the main village, and then added a few more broken towers to complete the ruins. I finished with a few trees surrounding the area, and connected it with a path back to the main street, and that completes our castle ruins. Something else our village needs is a library, so you guessed it, we're going to build exactly that. I've gone for sandstone for this build to really emphasise the added details. I made sure to include some arches at the front for that traditional look. I'm adding the usual details with vines and leaves, because they're just so versatile, and added some final touches around the entrance. And that completes our library. Just behind this, we have a large open space, ideal for a public park. Perfect spot to read your new book on a nice summer's day. I filled this space with a cozy campfire and a pond nearby. I then connected back to the main road and continued this out of the village. I finished up with some benches and smaller details along the wall. Now so far, we've managed to add quite a lot of life to our village, from the chimneys on the houses to the market stalls in the centre square. But there's one area that's fallen behind, the water. So to fix that, what better than to add a boat harbour to the village? I began by dredging out the lake to make it slightly deeper for our boats, before then expanding the river wall and path. With this expansion, we have some more space for buildings, which we'll get back to shortly. Starting work now on the dock. Now I'll be honest, there's probably nothing really Italian about this design. I just went for a standard dock using spruce wood, but I think it still matches the village just fine. No harbour is complete without some boats, of course. I tried this modern design to start, but scrapped it and went with some wood variants instead. With smaller builds, it really helps to have trapdoors and signs to add those finer details. I made a few different designs using alternating wood types for a nice variety of colour. I added a few up and down the river to finish. And that completes our harbour. Next up, it's time to work on those buildings we marked out earlier, with the first one being some more general housing. Of course, we need a large balcony to take in those riverside views. I expect this is probably one of the more expensive houses in the village. Attached to this, I used regular terracotta to build one more house next door, as I feel these colours work great together. Next up, I've gone for a white building, using diorite, calcite and white concrete. This one's going to be another riverside restaurant or cafe, with a courtyard at the back, and of course some balconies on the upper floor. I finished up with a small townhouse made of brick, granite and terracotta. And we're done. Moving away from that area for now, and it's time that we built a school. I found this spot at the top of the village which I thought would be perfect. I began by plotting a rough outline of the build. Now this was tricky because I wanted it to look unique from the houses, but at the same time not look out of place. So I went with a slightly different roof design and made it slightly larger than the houses, and I think it turned out quite nice. We of course need an area for the children to play, and luckily I had a space just for this behind the building. I added a pond, some custom trees, a wall running around the side, and finished with some benches to sit down and relax. And that's the school complete. We have a little more space opposite this, and the village is also needing of some more residential housing, so let's add some in. What I love about this house style is you can be as creative as you like with the shape and colour. Here I've used yellow and orange terracotta with a deep slate roof, finishing this house off with a balcony, along with some leaves and flowers. And we can't forget some chimneys on top for the added ambience. And that completes the first house. Just next door we've got space for another small house. I went with a packed mud and brown mushroom gradient on this one, with warped wood for the detailing. Probably one of my favourite colour palettes I've used so far. I finished off with a small path between the two houses. Heading back over to the lake, and look, I know we're not next to an ocean, and it doesn't really make sense, but a lighthouse would just look so nice in this village, right? Well, I'm adding one anyway, and I found the perfect spot right next door to the harbour. I've gone for white as the main colour, alongside blackstone and copper accents. I wanted something different from the classic red and white. I've used stained glass with streamlight at the top to give a warm yellow hue, and used some more copper blocks to finish the peak of the tower. Now, as you can see, I tried out a few variations for the base, but in the end I reverted back to the original design I'd built before. And the last thing to do was to add some details, and obviously it's not complete without those vines and leaves that we've used all over town. And that completes our lighthouse. Just behind this, we've got space for another building, and I didn't want to take away from the lighthouse in front, so I went for something small and simple. This one turned out to be a fisherman's house. The last but definitely not least addition to this village was this beach, because I thought just having one beach in the village wasn't quite enough, and it would be silly not to take advantage of this beautiful lake. I surrounded the nearby area with trees and rocks, and of course added some sun loungers and towels. And that completes our beach. Now, just before we see the results, we have one small issue. Most of the buildings right now are currently empty, and there's over 20 of them, so let's fix that. With the help of over 20 other creators, we've completely filled every building in town, from the large church in the centre, all the way to the small cozy houses nestled down the narrow streets. You can find everyone who helped listed in the caption below. Now, some of these interiors aren't just what meets the eye. We've hidden various secrets throughout the village, some hidden in plain sight, whilst others a little more tricky to find. I wanted this map to not just look great, but to also be a fun and immersive experience for those who explore it, uncovering the secrets hidden beneath the surface. Just before we end, the final thing our village needs is some residents, of course. The final touch to bring our village to life. I tried to include as many professions as possible when designing the buildings to get a nice variety of villagers. And if you'd like to explore the village for yourself, you can download the finished world and all individual build assets over on my Patreon. Link is down below. Now that's enough waiting around, let's see the final results.